Another day, more coaching moves, and more questions without answers about Nebraska's 2-year starting quarterback.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all year long.
All right, welcome. It is Wednesday. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Hopefully, wherever you live did not blow over in the last several hours here. If you were located in eastern Nebraska,
Windy.
Yeah, it indeed is windy. But as Mitch mentioned, more changes and a surprise yesterday. Matt Rhule came to the podium to, kind of talk about bowl practices, and obviously we knew it wasn't going to be all about bowl practices, although there's some pieces of information in there. But he went down the list of things that have sort of happened as far as coaching moves are concerned, as far as his offensive line coach being fired and then hiring a new one, defensive coordinator being fired and then hiring a new one, and then a new one entirely, where he announced that Terry Bradden would not return as Nebraska's defensive line coach.
Yeah, he said, I've fired 3 coaches in the past several days. And I think everyone kind of looked around the room like, what are we about to hear? And
3? I got 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So then he made the announcement quickly. There's about 30 seconds of suspense before he got to Terry Bradden and thanked him for his time at Nebraska, his one season at Nebraska. And then Rhule said, before I take questions, I'll give you guys a moment to tweet that out. I know that you're all very, very much needing to do that. So
nice.
Never heard a coach go down that road before. So
he was like, I get it. I know how it goes. I get it.
Yeah. So we talked about this yesterday without knowing that it was going to come on Tuesday in Lincoln with the new defensive coordinator, Rob Aurich, and what happened with Nebraska and stopping the run this year. And really, as the season has reached this point with the break before the bowl game, one of the things that I'm curious about, or that strikes me as odd in kind of the post-mortem of 2025 Nebraska football, is the suggestion that really all or most of the defensive linemen were somehow playing out of position this year. You've heard those kind of comments from Matt Rhule about how he would have loved to have had Keona Davis as an edge rusher and Cam Lenhart in the same role. And these players were playing defensive tackle. And, of course, there were varying versions of what Nebraska used with a front. It was a 4-man front at times. It was a 3-man front at times. You didn't have a true nose tackle. Was Riley Van Poppel playing the position that he was meant to play? Was Elijah Judy, was he a fit at the spot that he played? And, my thought is not, well, good thing they fired the defensive line coach. It's more, why didn't they find a way to fix that during the season? Why didn't they find a way to at least get players more suited for the spots that they had to play? I realize you have a roster and you have a scheme, and these things the roster clearly is impossible to change in the middle of the season. The scheme is very difficult to do, but you also had an off season to prepare for all of this. So I'm not going to throw all of that on Terry Bradden. And I guess that's why John Butler is gone too. Part of
100%. I mean, definitely. I mean, what you're outlining is those guys were not necessarily put in perfect positions to be able to succeed. That's for sure. And in Butler's case, and then it all trickles down from there, you're still kind of running Tony White's defense. And so there's these parameters that you have to kind of stay inside. And then it's the same thing with Bradden as far as the guys that you have, at your fingertips to be able to play, and how do you teach it and what are you teaching? So I just think there were two sort of confined into the idea of how they wanted to do things. And now with a clean break and a fresh slate and a new defensive coordinator and a new sort of, way you're going to go about your business entirely, maybe that clears the deck, and that's the hope. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Butler and Braden, but it may not have been completely their fault.
I don't think it's as simple as to just say this, and oftentimes we simplify it too much. But one complaint that I've heard often about the Nebraska defense this year, especially after the last two games, is just the inability up front to be able to set the edge. So you would hope that with this 4-man front, this 4-2-5 scheme that Rob Aurich is going to bring, and a new defensive line coach now, Aurich has experience coaching the edge rushers, like where John Butler, his specific area of expertise was with the secondary. Aurich is more linebackers and edge players. So that's an area, and we'll talk about this a lot in the offseason, where when you look for what the Nebraska defense has to get better at, you got to be able to set that edge. You can't allow a Northwestern running back to take a handoff and just scoot around the corner and go 60 yards untouched. If he's gonna score from a long distance or break off a run, he better have broken through a tackle or made somebody miss or something like that. So that's going to be one of the things, and there is conversation already that we'll get to later in the show about what might be happening with Nebraska at the defensive line coaching spot. So but let's talk about the offensive line coaching spot, and specifically a question that Matt Rhule fielded on Tuesday about the firing of Donovan Raiola. And this is very fair. This question, we'll play the question and then you'll hear Matt Rhule's answer, but it relates to the starting quarterback. Here it is.
Coach, since you made the announcement about Donnie, have you spoken with Dylan about that specific move and about Dylan's future here?
Yeah. Again, I'm so sorry, but you guys know I'm not going to talk about any player's future. Like, I'm just not doing that. Right? That's their job, right? That's each player's job. If they're, they have to announce their own things, because I would never want to misspeak. But yeah, I talked to the whole team about Donnie, and certainly to Dylan. I mean, that's his uncle. He loves him, right? So. I certainly talked to him, but I talked to all the O-linemen. I talked to all the guys. I mean, Donnie was loved by a lot of guys. And so, at the end of the day, I don't like firing people. I don't like affecting their families. I don't like moving on from people. But I do have to do what I think is right for the program. And, so I certainly talked to Dylan, and I certainly talked to all the O-linemen. I talked to talked to the team. In terms of people's futures, I think that's up to each person, right? Like Emmett came and saw me and told me, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I told him how proud I was of him, but that's his announcement to make, not mine. So.
Okay. What's interesting is he did talk about a lot of players' futures on Tuesday. He talked about Andrew Marshall's future playing for his old position coach, Rob Aurich. They were together at Idaho. He talked about Williams Winery, his future, and Keona Davis's future, and Raleigh Van Poppel. He talked about some of the running backs that Nebraska brings back last year. So it isn't that he doesn't want to talk about players' futures. It's that he doesn't want to talk about Dylan Raiola's future, which is that telling? What are we thinking here?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's undecided. But you guys can read the writing on the wall as well as anybody else. I mean, you look at when Dayton decommitted, you look at when Donovan Raiola gets fired, and it's not just that. It's not just that. The family is close and all those different things. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast before, Mitch. I mean, they were shopping him last off season to see what spot
his camp was shopping him.
Yeah, potentially end up in. And I would imagine, the translation here is the same thing is happening right now. Wherever that offer looks like, or whatever that positioning looks like for him, he'll evaluate that. It could be Nebraska. I would find it unlikely at this point that it would be Nebraska, but just given how they've sort of talked about him and all that other stuff, that maybe I'm reading into that a little bit too much. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's all that difficult to see that there has been a stark change in the way that Dylan Raiola gets talked about, and the apparatus around him too.
And why do we keep talking about Dylan Raiola? Well, he is possibly the most talented from
It's
a
the GPs.
passing
It's quarterback.
standpoint,
Yeah.
quarterback in the history of Nebraska football. I'm not saying he's the most successful quarterback in Nebraska football, but his sheer ability to throw the ball and run the offense that Matt Rhule envisions Nebraska running, or at least what he envisioned for Nebraska to run the past 2 years. Dylan is a great fit at that. Does he have faults? Yes. In his play, is he extremely talented and worthy of the 5-star rating that he received coming out of high school? Yes. Would he be highly coveted if he does go into the portal? That's where the question comes in that I think we have to speculate on here. So what I think's happening, and you suggested this by talking about how his camp shopped him a year ago, is that's exactly what's going on. They are getting a sense of what could be out there if Dylan were to go in the portal. And what you don't want to do is go in the portal before you have a landing spot and end up taking a 70% pay cut, like Nico Iamaleava did last year in going from Tennessee to UCLA. So Raiola's camp is smart. And if they're looking around, they want to find a spot and they want to know what he's going to get paid before any kind of an announcement is made. So nothing's going to leak out to the media until they have a real good idea, unless they have a real good idea of what it might be. And he's limited somewhat in where he can go because it has to be a team that doesn't necessarily want to feature a highly mobile quarterback. And it has to be a team, this is what's new in college football now, that wears Adidas. Dylan has an Adidas deal. Could he break that? Could he go to a Nike school? Could he go to an Under Armour school? Of course. But where's he going to have the opportunity to get paid the most? It's somewhere with Adidas. It's Miami. It's Arizona State. It's Texas Tech.
Yeah.
It's Indiana. It's Georgia Tech. Like, these are the schools that you have to look for and assess the situation of whether they're looking for a quarterback in the portal and would they be interested in a guy with the skill set of Dylan Raiola.
I would add this too. And, there's, you talked about it a little bit, but I think there's a real prominent football discussion in this too. I'm with you. I mean, no doubt on the Adidas thing and the money thing. Absolutely. But the football part is, it just really feels like Nebraska is pointed in the direction now of having a more dynamic and mobile quarterback. Their new offensive line coach was coaching the blockers for Haynes King last year, who is a dynamic mobile quarterback, right? And so that doesn't tell you everything. Dana Holgorsen in his past has worked with dynamic and mobile quarterbacks, and
Will Greer.
This has been new over the last year plus here. So it just feels to me like Nebraska's sort of pointing in that direction a little bit. Not that they're giving him the boot or anything like that, but it would make a lot of sense for a separation on both sides at this moment. And I do feel like that's the way we're headed.
Whether it's perception or reality, it does seem a bit at this moment. And Dylan is around the program right now. Like he's in Lincoln. He's finishing up the semester. He's rehabbing his broken right leg, and so there's not any kind of separation there that's already happened. I think some people are of that, are thinking in that way, but it's not. Like he's around and supportive of this team. But I also feel like Nebraska is in some way the Raiola backup plan at this moment. Like, if he doesn't find something that's a better fit for him, then he can always come back to Nebraska. And I don't imagine that that's something that Pat Stewart and Matt Rhule and the people in charge of Nebraska's roster necessarily enjoy all that much. That's just me saying that. But that's the feeling I get.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. We have plenty more to come, including a couple more from Matt Rhule up next on Locked On Nebraska podcast. But first, a word from our friends at FanDuel, the FanDuel Sportsbook, where NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you could place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. The live betting is best when the game starts to shift, or when you have an inkling that the game is starting to shift. So the live spreads and the money lines adjust instantly. The player props update as the guys heat up. So take a look at whatever you have on the board. If you're just watching a game, you're sitting around, and then live betting for FanDuel is going to be the opportunity for you with significant shifts in this late season. NFL. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, head to FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. With FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you.
Welcome back, Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer. Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen of the day, and thanks for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, let's get back to Matt Rhule. Tuesday media session to preview the bowl game. We heard from the head coach. We heard from Andrew Marshall, who I mentioned earlier in this show, played for Nebraska's new defensive coordinator, Rob Aurich, when the two of them were at Idaho. In fact, Aurich was involved in the recruiting of Andrew Marshall out of Southern California, and then was his worked with his position group in the secondary. I mentioned that Aurich has experience with edge rushers, but he is multifaceted in the positions that he has worked with before he was a defensive coordinator. So he moved on to San Diego State 2 years ago. Marshall, of course, moved on to Nebraska last year. Got some comments, heard some positive comments from Marshall. Also heard from Luke Lindenmeyer, Nebraska's tight end, as the Huskers get ready for the December 31st Las Vegas Bowl against Utah. So let's get to an important question that Matt Rhule was asked. This is straightforward, and it seems that you would know the answer to this, but it's good to hear Matt Rhule address it. Were the decisions to replace the offensive line coach and the defensive line coach immediately after the season reflective of Rhule's unhappiness with the play at the line of scrimmage this season? Here's Matt Rhule.
We move forward. As we move forward, as I talked to Rob, he had some visions of how he wanted it to be, and so that was an area that, he had some notions about, hey, I want this is important to me. So, I think it's important that, to have the coordinator come in and have like, hey, here's your staff. That's really hard to do. And so have some people that are familiar with what he does, so it's, I think that was on one side. And then I think just, in terms of on the offensive line play, just, as we move forward kind of with Dana's offense and where we want to go, just looked at, there's nothing about what happened before it's just really just looking at Jeep and the recruiter that he is, just the scheme that he runs. I think it fits really well with Dana. So, at the end of the year, I thought we ran the football. I was very complimentary of our offensive line, so I don't. It's nothing about that. I think, like I said, I think Donovan's one of the best offensive line coaches. I just think this is just a fit thing for as we move forward, and I don't want to minimize, Jeep's impact. I think we can have in recruiting. We'll probably announce another addition here at some point that I think will also have major impact, but it's just not done yet. I don't want to say it until it's done offensively. So I think there's some things that we want to do moving forward that don't necessarily reflect like anything that we didn't do past. It's just, hey, how do we make this jump? Like, we've gotten ourselves to be a respected football team, but we want to become a great one.
Teasing at another hire there, and reportedly says yet to be confirmed by Matt Rhule. But you can see that there's something happening here. Lonnie Teasley, the former offensive line coach at South Carolina, who was let go along with others on that offensive staff midway through last season. He is experienced and has worked with Marcus Satterfield, among others, on the Nebraska staff. I believe he was part of the Temple staff that goes way back to Matt Rhule's early time there in Philadelphia. So look for
what would that
Lonnie
role be
Teasley
for, Mitch? What would he do?
Well, most of his work has been with the O-line. And when you see him, it's clear that he has some history playing offense. He looks like an offensive lineman. He recruits offensive linemen. Jeep Wade is going to be your offensive line coach. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if you have two coaches to work with the offensive line.
Yeah, interesting.
So I would imagine, I that's where some of the clarity has to come in on what Teasley would do if he's a part of this thing. But he would be involved with the offensive line in some capacity, and it might be more as a recruiter.
Okay, that's an interesting way to set it up. I mean, there's no limits on who you can have on your staff or anything like that anymore. So
Nope.
Rhule did mention in the press conference yesterday, he said, hey, all the great assistant coaches, they recruit, right? Which I felt like was sort of notable and almost pointed in the moment. So yeah, I there's a ton to sort out, and who's pointing the fingers and who's in charge and all that stuff. Feels like Rhule has a pretty good idea of the direction he wants to take this, but also he's got to get input from these people who he just hired as well.
Yeah, I think from a coordinator standpoint, it's not essential to be a key person on the road, and that's not going to be Dana Holgorsen. They're not going to change his role and send him out on the road to recruit. But John Butler didn't recruit much away from Lincoln in his year as the coordinator. I think Rob Aurich will. I think Rob Aurich is 38 years old. It has some connections in the state of California that can be beneficial to Nebraska, although he is a Midwestern, has Midwestern roots. But I do think they'll use Aurich in recruiting. And interestingly, Nebraska already has a former offensive lineman in Keith Williams who doesn't have a full-time coaching position on the staff, but is an important figure in Nebraska, one of the most important figures in Nebraska's recruiting world in going out and seeing players. So if you were to add Teasley to that mix, Nebraska could go overnight into becoming a formidable, at least on paper, in its ability to recruit offensive linemen.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure who Teasley is tied to as far as players, but I think it's very possible that you can look
Bring
at
somebody.
Yeah, you could look at coaches and you say, well, do you need an instant influx of guys to your roster? This guy's attached at the hip to several, whatever it might be, and bring them along.
Even if they're not South Carolina players, being from that part of the country and recruiting in that part of the country, undoubtedly he would have connections to players in the SEC who are on other rosters that he attempted to recruit. And maybe some of those players are on teams that are going through coaching changes right now. There are a few in the SEC in that spot. So yeah, you never know like what direction that might go with Teasley if he's officially added. Rhule provided some insight into his interview process with Rob Aurich, which I thought was interesting because as we were in front of our computers and televisions on Saturday and hearing about Vince Karras, the Toledo DC who ended up at Syracuse, Nebraska at that point had moved on either because Karras indicated he was going to Syracuse or Nebraska felt better about the next candidate. One way or another, Saturday in Lincoln was spent assessing Rob Aurich. He came in after having a number of phone conversations last week with Matt Rhule and then sat down with Phil Snow for an hour in the football complex, got a whole tour of the facility from Jarrett Wishon, Rhule's right-hand man, and Susan Elza. And then he just basically went off with Matt for a nice Saturday in Lincoln. They went out to Firethorn, had lunch with the coach and his son Bryant, and then Rhule took him to watch some youth basketball that his daughters were participating in. So he said he wanted to see him kind of in the wild and get a sense of what Aurich's emotional intelligence was, just kind of the ability to sit there and talk football in the bleachers while watching some kids run up and down the court. A little different than being in an office in a nice chair where it's quiet in an interview setting. So I like that. I like that kind of style from Rhule to get a sense more of who the person is that he's hiring.
Yeah, and just to confirm, Rhule's daughters were playing in the youth basketball games that they went to.
Let's play that clip.
Okay, good.
In the interview process, like kind of why I wanted to do that thing, like. I talked to him a bunch of times on the phone, but when he came here, I wanted to like spend time with him in different places and just see like his emotional intelligence and see how quick he was on his feet. I think he's going to be a guy that brings a tremendous amount of passion, to what we do.
Did you know somebody playing in those basketball games?
My daughters. Yeah. I don't just go to youth games. I mean, it's a little creepy. Let's say, no, my daughters were playing. Yeah, my daughters.
Hey, Coach, you mentioned that.
I can't believe that question. No, I'm sorry. No, I went and saw my daughters play. Yeah.
I get it. You're just going into that's our dear friend Steve Sipple. Thank you, Sipple. But he goes into like you're almost right. I'm sure you're almost writing. You could attest this, Mitch. You're almost writing the story in your head as he's talking, right? Yep. And so you want to add like one little context, like Rhule went
for sure. You need details
somewhere in Lincoln.
Great writers have details.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. And so he just like instinctually asked whose games were they, basically, but it
was a great moment. Did you know someone playing? I assumed it was his daughters, and
definitely.
You don't want to assume, though. He could have been watching another coach's kids or something like that. But as Rhule said, he doesn't just go to youth basketball games to scout the scene if he doesn't know anyone in the game. Good to know. To know about the head coach.
And it wouldn't be a very good place to like hide out either if you were trying to like keep the hire thing under wraps, because everybody's at those things, you know.
It's shocking, Connor, that there were not photos floating around the internet on Saturday of Matt Rhule sitting with Mr. Bald Redbeard.
Mystery guy.
Yeah. Why is Rhule with Connor Happer at his daughter's at Rhule's daughter's youth basketball game on Saturday afternoon? That would have been the talk around the internet. I am stunned that those pictures did not make their way out, like from obscured behind one of those wall separators between the courts.
I know.
So maybe they were playing in a game that wasn't at like one of the big complexes where there's 9,000 people watching youth basketball on any given Saturday.
Honestly, that was the first thing I thought too. I don't know how this didn't, this wasn't talked about, but somehow made it undercover. So nice job by those guys. All right, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Rob Aurich and the personality part and who he is maybe a little similar to on the staff already after this.
All right, a word here from Rougiette, back with us at the Locked On Nebraska podcast. So let's talk about something that most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from money, from work, from life. It just doesn't switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rougiette Ready is a next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rougiette Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. The science behind Rougiette Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. You connect with a board-certified doctor online. Everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why more than 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready.
All right, here's a reminder. Get those questions in for the mailbag. We'll still do those each Friday. Excited to do some, like, doesn't have to be about the game or, whatever it might be, although there is still 1 remaining game for Nebraska football in a couple weeks at the Las Vegas Bowl. So in the hiring process of Rob Aurich, it was clear, and we talked about this before the hire even happened, Mitch. Matt Rhule was looking for kind of a specific thing, and it was not in scheme. It was more in personality and how he, how he coached and how his relationship with his players was. And so let's have Matt Rhule explain to you what he found when he was speaking to Rob Aurich, and he makes a little bit of a comp. And here's Matt Rhule.
Yeah, I probably did not do a good enough service to Butler. So in this reboot, I know the style I want to play, which is fast and physical and violent. I think you've mentioned a couple of times how fast we looked in the first year and how it's kind of every year looked, and I just can't live with that, right? So I wanted a system. I didn't want like game plan plays. I didn't care if it was 4 down, 3 down, 5. I wanted someone to come in here and show me like, here's how we're going to win the Big Ten. And his system, he's a 4 down quarters guy coming out of sort of like that family of people, and I love that part about him. And Marshall was just like, Coach, he's a great coach. And so he has the energy, he has all that. But like you always hear me when I talk about Eckler, the thing I always talk about is he's a great teacher. He has got a great system. You know, some of his assistants that are working under him, like people are trying to hire them right now because they want Eckler's system. It's not Eckler's energy. It's not the blood on the face on the sideline. It's the teaching progressions are so elite. They're so elite that like he could leave tomorrow and we would be doing the exact same things that Mike's brought to us. So he's made our program better. I want the same thing on defense.
It's got to be at least a little bit about the energy, though, right? You know, like that
With Eckler, yeah.
With Eckler and with any coach who's sort of like that. And it sounds
That's
like
how he gets his points across.
Exactly.
Like you can have the great mind and the great, practice plans, and this is how we practice. But I mean, he gets his message across and communicates with the players and the other coaches with that energy.
Yeah, it seems like that is a key part of what they're doing. It seems like Rob Aurich, I sort of described him earlier in the week as like just knowing what I know about him so far, which is very little, but just a quick, short dive into what he's sort of done and how he is. Seems like, I don't know, like 75% of an Eckler or something like that, So I agree with Rhule in the objective of this is exactly what they needed. And he didn't go out and fill the spot just because, with a guy who brings this type of energy, just because that's the only thing he felt like he needed. Obviously there's qualifications that Rob Aurich meets, and the system and the style and all of those things. But I did feel like Nebraska needed some juice. And they addressed the special teams problem instantly overnight with Mike Eckler, and part of what he brings to the table is that type of energy and the teaching progressions and all that stuff too. So I feel like this is a really, interesting way and potentially a quick way to, get what they need on defense as well. And so I have pretty high expectations for Orange because I think they have some pieces to work with. They should be able to kind of snap the fingers and be pretty solid next year. And we'll see what they get in the transfer portal as well.
You're really dependent on him. And this gets a little schemy, but to have linebackers who can make those run fits. And that's where Nebraska really struggled at the end of this season. You heard we go back to Rhule at the beginning of the press conference a couple weeks ago after the Penn State game when he mentioned that Nebraska had missed fits or missed assignments on 8 consecutive plays to start that game. And that comes down to the front and the linebackers being able to make the run fits. Penn State was running the ball.
It just comes down to focus, Mitch. Like it's just focus and execution. That's it. They have the players who could do it. It's not that it's not that their linebackers can't physically do it. It's just focus and execution. And I think the way to get that message across to those players that need the focus and execution all the time is the energy piece of it, right? I feel like that's a huge part.
It's a big part. I mean, you have to play football the right way too, and the way to get players to play the right way is to have them believe in the system that you run. So that's a big part of it. But what I was saying about Aurich and Rhule talked about quarters or cover 4 defense, 2 high safeties, where you have 4 defensive backs and they're each covering a quarter of the field. Like you're not going to get a ton of support in that system from your secondary in the run game. So you need to be sound and technically into it up front. With that, and that defense will thrive if you hit your run fits, if you set the edge, right. if you do the things that Orich's system is going to teach, and if you're like Eckler, where you have that ability to connect and you're passionate about it, then your players are more likely to buy it.
Any defense works if it's executed, right? in theory, if you have good enough players,
works within reason.
Within reason, right? Bad to say any, I suppose, but it works if executed. If the people are in the right spot, you have answers laid out on paper to all of the questions, right? You have solutions to the problems. But the difference in successful defenses and unsuccessful defenses is how often are you able to execute it? How often are you able to be in the right spot and have the people who can make the tackles and all those things? And that's the difference. That was the difference this year for Nebraska in the first 10 games of the year, or, the first 7 or whatever it was. And then the last 3 or the last 5, after the Minnesota game. That was the difference. They it fell off from that regard, because I just feel like they got a little too, I just felt like they thought they could win with scheme, and it's just executing, man. So I hear coaches say it all the time: execution. You might get blue in the face hearing it, but like it's the God honest truth. If you have guys in the right spot, if they're doing the right thing, you're going to be the best version of yourself. That's it.
Okay, be on the lookout Wednesday today for developments that involve the defensive line coach that continues to move fast. Elijah Robinson has been the target. Sometimes, though, when we get word of this, Nebraska's already moved on to another target. So that seemed to be the case with the DC over the weekend. But as we know right now, Nebraska continues to go after Elijah Robinson, the former Syracuse DC who was demoted to D-line coach. He's an ex-Rhule staffer who's been coveted this offseason by LSU and perhaps Penn State, with Matt Campbell is a suitor in the Elijah Robinson sweepstakes as well. So we'll be on the lookout for that. And then big night tonight at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Nebraska, Wisconsin. Huskers trying to move to 10-0, match the record of the Nebraska women who moved to 10-0 on Tuesday night. So biggest test for Fred Hoiberg and his crew this season as the Badgers invade Lincoln for the Big Ten opener.
Look at that. Very exciting. Let me see if I can get a line from our friends at FanDuel right now. Nebraska, a 1.5 favorite tonight.
Is that right?
At PBA.
Interesting. All right. That's all for today. Thanks for tuning in to the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Be sure to join us tomorrow. We'll have some reaction to that basketball game and whatever else is going on in the world of Nebraska football. You never know where the day is going to take you. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Nebraska so you can get all the latest episodes. Find us on social media, on Twitter, X, at LO Nebraska. And if you find Locked On Nebraska in your Spotify Wrapped, prove it on social media and secure a free month with our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag the national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code for that. For those of you on video, we're going to send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On College Football. Have a good day.